that's fine. Oh, I like this. Okay. So, yeah, I think, yeah, you can come get a view. Oh, okay. Well, all right. So we'll go ahead and start then. The event. Thank you all for your patience, and thank you for coming. I've been wanting to do some events in VR like this for some time. We've got some people here in the Media Lab. I'm so grateful that people are joining us. I like that my video keeps moving up and down. It's a nice view. And I'm so thrilled to have Alex and Jake with us today. So what we're going to do, the plan, is I'll introduce Alex, who has a presentation, and I think will be leading us on a guided tour of some selections from the introduction to Jake's book, Leech, which she wrote. And so we'll follow Alex around for a little bit, and then we'll hear from Jake, who has a presentation for us, and I think also will be guiding us through some of the treasures he's hidden throughout the space. I want to start by acknowledging, so we're coming from UCLA. This is the Text Tech Media Lab. Brian, the disembodied television. Where are you, Brian? Are you still
I don't know. I'm standing in my living
He's
room.
over here. He's to your left.
I'm next to Hardhead.
I see you
I'm
there.
next to
Yeah.
the rabbit, basically.
So
You're next to the rabbit. Me,
Nice.
Robin.
So Brian and I have been working to coordinate the Text Tech Media Lab here in the English department at UCLA over the last couple of years, and we're slowly getting it launched and thinking about how to do more events like this. So I appreciate you all experimenting and playing with us as we get that moving and start figuring out what that might look like. I think the impetus is to come up with ways of engaging that are a bit more playful, a bit more open, and subject to experiment. But while keeping, I guess, some of the live interactions that you get to have being co-present. I know people are joining on a number of different devices. There's at least 2 people wearing headsets, Brian among them. But I know others are on their laptops or phones and devices. There's, I think, 3 or 4 different screens in here that are all running at the same time. So without further ado, I think let's just launch into things. One of the screens. So we'll launch into things, and I'm going to introduce Alex. Does that sound okay, Alex? You're nicely
Let me
framed.
just share my video. So hi, this is me. I'm the Robin. I'm standing in front of my own book, We the Parasites, which is really akin to Jake's book, and one of the reasons I think I was asked to write this introduction. You know what? Do you really need to see I'm happy to share my face, but let's see how this goes. The cat has left, so less interesting.
Lovely.
Can you all see me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So as much as I'm looking at myself. So I'm gonna just talk to you briefly, and then, so when I was writing the introduction for Jake's book, I think Mike Corral at 1111, a professor I really like and admire, and who was the designer for this book, said something like it felt like the Leech operating system booting up. And so my introduction was really a response to my experience with Jake's book. So I would encourage you all to buy the book. I don't know if there'll be PDFs as well. Jake, what's the distribution such?
Yeah, so I'll drop in a link to the book, and also I'll also drop my email in here, and if anyone wants to
if you guys can do your bottom
get a hold of the book, I can pass that along. I'll start throwing things in the chat, I guess, right now.
Yeah, and also my Twitter is @SaintSoftness, and usually that links to all my other shit. So I put that in the chat for everyone who wants it. But yeah, so my introduction was really a response to Jake's themes of apocalyptic worlds, extractive capitalism. We can talk about this more in the co-discussion later, but he uses a lot of Warhol and Smithson. And so I responded by going to Onkawara and sort of ideas of Mapplethorpe. I used my own photos and drawings in Stable Diffusion and in Midjourney to make some of the images that co-populate the pages with my text. So I got the page dimensions from Mike, and then I designed the individual spreads. So when we're blowing through them in avatar form, this might not be immediately clear, but they're kind of designed to coexist as page spreads. Danny, Jake, and I were all discussing how we've all been influenced by the history of the book. Despite being like super techie, nerdy people, we all love physical books. So it's definitely coexisting, the digital hybrid with the history of the text as an object. So what I'm going to do is stop sharing my screen, and I'm just going to go behind the two figures, like the two big statues. So I'm like walking through here, and I'm going to start going toward these billboarded images. So if you could follow me, I'm going to engage in fly mode because it makes it easier for me, but you don't have to. And if you angle your screen so you face the images, it's easier to see what's going on. So this is the sort of first page of the introduction, and I had no idea like who Jake was. I made a point of not Googling him. I just read the book. And this also tied into the sort of themes of Gibson-esque old school Mark Fisher, CCRU, cyberpunk. So you can see these billboarded pages of the book that you can look up and down at. Can you guys hear me? Is everyone?
Yeah, we're with you.
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you, but I'm right behind you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's helpful too. So, okay, so the billboarded images will just blow over you. I also use like German Kleinmeister printers and Dutch engravers from I'm an early modern art historian by training. So to think about Jake's themes of spider webs, but in a kind of longue durée way. So you'll see some of those in the illustrations. At the time I was writing this, I was obsessed with the nuclear warnings. This is not a place of honor, etc. And I was looking if I could get them on food shorts, and it turns out someone had already made them, which was something. And this is a line from Leech that really struck me that I put into the introduction. The reason that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism is because it's not very difficult to imagine the end of the world. Additionally, various worlds are ending every day. We experience the ending of worlds regularly, but most of us haven't sustained an outside to capitalism. It seeps into everything. It even participates in the ending of worlds. So those are the booty shorts with the nuclear warning on them that you can buy, and that's Jake's phrase about the end of the world. I mean, it's really hilarious and it's meant to be. And the fact that we're in this space, which is a world that will sort of end, is great. And the background was a gesture to the dialectic between signal and noise and node and point and system that Jake uses throughout. Obviously, I sort of nodded to Geiger and the Matrix, which were, things I saw in the text in some of the illustrations. I personally am really interested in expressions of sort of high capitalist femininity and the internet. So, and also where that falls theoretical and intellectual intersections. So this is where you can see I actually used a photo of my own face and lipstick to generate some of these, as well as drawings of dots. You'll see that I used the phrase punch the clock, which was a gesture towards, Jake's investigations of capitalist stuff. I'm talking about latent space a lot because when I was making these, I was wasting a lot of time using early beta versions of Midjourney and other algorithms. And extractive capital with relationship to AI is something I'm still exploring in a lot of my work. And the question of what does it mean to say there is nothing of value here. I have a review coming out about this in literature in the expanded field and sort of what does it mean to write with AI and how do we answer these questions? And I think about how the Leon data set was scraped and tagged mostly by people in third world countries getting paid very little. So the existence of the Leon data set itself, which was used to make these images, is another act of extractive capital. Thinking about that. I complain about how Shinji should get in the robot because who doesn't? In the tech world, it's probably an inside joke for those of you who are extreme nerds, but this is a stat done in the style of Geiger, but as etched by Dürer, I think was how I did it. And I was also struck by the use of the phrases like punch the clock really confuse algorithms like Midjourney because they don't understand that it's an allegory or metaphor. Or in this case, punch the clock, when you're punching the work clock with your punch card in manual labor. This is the reference, but of course Midjourney thinks you're literally punching the clock, and so does Stable. And so I started using these images of the blood spattered clocks and I put them in Ankawara-esque grids, and you can see a few more of them. I talk about the mall and the space of the mall too in the cyberpunk imagination. And it's not an essay. It's like Jake's book, a sort of discursive response to the situation at hand. And you can see how I make grids of related diffusion images to sort of explore what latent space looks like in the two-dimensional frame of the book. You know, latent space is obviously, it's not an end space, it's a non-Euclidean space that maps to a Euclidean space in multiple dimensions. And so latent space is this really weird phenomenon that's hard to understand, especially even on a 2D page. But these were some attempts to sort of reckon with the latent space intellectually and environmentally that we are making. There are some references to Markov chains, which are algorithmically used to generate these images. So if you just sort of buzz around, you can see pages from the introduction hovering. They look really cool because the book is square. And you can see Victoria's Secret angels walking into nuclear apocalypses, layered with phrases and algorithmic components that make these images. And I did that layering myself, and I designed the pages myself to complement the rating. So it was a hybrid work, just like the book I was responding to. I wanted the introduction to be reflective of the text that it responded to. And one of the great things about Jake's work is that it's so generative and so open to theorization, but also to artistic responses. And I think when we have some distance from these works in the early sort of paradigital space, we'll remark how great it is that they opened up these worlds like this one to us. Even as, the piece is in some ways a sort of post-nihilist, post-capitalist act of mourning, I really loved getting involved in the text and becoming absorbed in the text. And it was weird, and I just got this weird PDF, and it was great. And so this is my weird ass response to a weird ass book, and I wish more publishers would take risks like 1111 and print these objects as well as making them available online, because I'm really looking forward to seeing this as a physical object too. So, and as we wander around this kind of fleshy, misty space, I hope that you enjoy how Jake really created this world that we can all latch onto like little book leeches, like I did in this introduction. So thank you so much, and I think we can move on to his portion of the space.
Thank you so much, Alex. This was so wonderful. And I didn't really get a chance to give a proper introduction. Would it be okay if I give you a little introduction alongside Jake's?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure if my current information is accurate. Just to let everyone know, in the fall, I'll be the critic in residence at Interdisciplinary Media at NYU. So you'll probably be seeing more of me, and hopefully with Danny in spaces like this, because I would love to do more of this.
Oh, it's so wonderful to have you in this space, and it's so wonderful to have these images. I think that my information is mostly up to date, working from your website, but also I just want to include some introduction to your work so people can find more of it online. Of course, I can't recommend We the Parasites, published by Sublunary Press, highly enough. As well as this beautiful introduction.
Hold up one sec.
Oh yeah.
We've just gone into a third printing, so actually we're out of books for 2 to 3 weeks. But I promise there are more after that. And local indies, I think Community Bookstore in Brooklyn, Arundel in Seattle still have a few copies. Sorry about that.
No, that's great. I mean, that's a good problem to have, I suppose. And I think a real show of the work that you do. And so just for those, Alex writes broadly on criticism, affect, biological forms, English Baroque, art historiography, comparative study of Japanese, post-war Japanese architecture, contemporary theory of emerging technology, including blockchains, NFTs, and crypto art. The work that Alex does, I'm inspired by its expansiveness, not just in terms of its form, but with the variety of contexts and disciplines that it intersects. You can find this writing on Firmament, Hyperallergic, the Times Literary Supplement, LA Review of Books, Art Forum, a variety of other publications. So while you're waiting for the next edition of We the Parasite to be released, there's plenty of Alex's writing to be found online. Yes. So at any rate, thank you so much, Alex. I really appreciate the way you guided us through this introduction, and so very happy to have you all here. It feels like such a weird, I don't know, it feels strange to be staring at a hot dog, a taco, a ghost, a robot, and an old iPod, while trying to give introductions, and I fear it's distracting me a little bit. But I wanted to introduce Jake. Are you ready to do your presentation? If I could give you a quick introduction.
Yeah, totally.
Wonderful. Well, we really gathered to celebrate and launch LEECH, this phenomenal new book by Jake Reber. I've got a short little introduction here, and then some things I wanted to say. Jake is I feel like I keep. Let me see. I'm trying to record a little bit of this space also. So I've got a really wild video to release at some point. Okay, so Jake Reber, writer, artist, and educator living in Buffalo, New York. He's the co-curator of Hysterically Real and the editor for Recreational Resources. Those of you who've encountered these phenomenal websites will immediately recognize the breadth and variety and experimentation and invention behind Jake's practice. He's published several artist books and experimental projects. I think an immediate precursor to LEECH is the book I was just talking about with my introduction to comic students today, Zero Excess, also published by 1111 Press. There are, I don't know how many books you've published, Jake. I don't know if you know how many books you've published. But some highlights include Invasive Species from Void Front Press, Bureaucratic Topologies from Gauss PDF, Lobster Genesis from Orworse, among many, many others, which I won't belabor. But I did want to say, before launching into this, that I've been very long inspired by Jake's publishing and writing practice. Most recently, I've had the good fortune to engage in a long-form conversation about glitch poetics via Around, where we co-write and have conversations. And throughout, his insight, brilliance, and poetic vision have both buoyed and anchored my own thought. So I'm so thrilled to be in this pink mist with all of you, and especially thrilled to be here to welcome Jake, eager to follow Jake through this distorted landscape and into LEECH. Quick note on LEECH from the publisher's site, for those who haven't seen it, which I think is a beautifully compressed and poetic articulation of the project. Quote, LEECH is a series of distorted poetic documents, glitchy environments, proximity readings, and digital mediations on the body and parasite, approached through our fragmented existence within a parasitic network. The apparatus beckons you, crawl through the pixelated pages and screens, slip inside the information systems that work through networks of contact, extractive processes, and parasitic behaviors within art making, embrace the psychic slippage, scry the poetics of contingency, drink the blood from the leech. I think the real magic in Jake's practice is that he's able to simulate the kind of thing we're doing here within the pages, the static pages of the codex. Opening and exploring through LEECH, I felt as disoriented and as inspired as I felt navigating the kinds of digital networks that I most love to inhabit with folks like yourselves. So with that said, I'm eager for Jake to guide us around. Afterwards, I'll just moderate a Q&A, and we'll be able to ask questions and follow up on conversation with both Jake and Alex. So that said, Jake, I'm going to delete myself from the screen and hand things over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Danny, for that really generous intro. Also, thank you, to Danny and Brian and Text Tech for hosting this event. Also, thank you so much to Alex for presenting and for writing such an incredible intro. I have told people numerous times that the book is worthwhile for the intro, and then you can kind of stick around for the rest of the sprawling mess that follows. So I want to maybe wander back towards the LEECH zone, where I was throwing a few things earlier today, and then I'll read some selections from the text. And maybe just follow me see if I can find my way back there. I'm a little bit turned around now that we've been wandering through here for a bit.
Yeah, I think we got reoriented.
But yeah, we have to.
So we have to blow back through, I think.
Yeah, and avoid the warnings from the booty shorts.
I really want them now. I'm probably gonna spend like $40.
All right, and we can. Cool. Yeah, slide through here. Oh yeah, some things have moved around a little bit. That's amazing. Okay, so
Oh,
we have a.
there it is.
Here's the creepy leech, which you can go inside of. I've also, dropped some text here. There's a mouth cave over around the side over here that you can go inside of, but it also takes you right to the edge. So a lot of these images and bits of text are fragments from the text itself, and I, have had pleasure of kind of spending some time in a few of these VR spaces with Danny, kind of playing with all of the assets that are built in. And you'll see up above there's a somewhat horrifying leech that's feeding on the weird bioarchitecture.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. I felt that needed to live in this space. Yeah, there's a few images kind of around from the text. And, this book and basically all of the previous projects I have made, I composed them in PowerPoint. And I have like an ongoing obsession and love for PowerPoint, and also, a deep disdain for some of the limitations that it imposes. But, one second. First, I actually used PowerPoint to then take some of the fragments from this text to create this presentation that's going to be kind of flowing behind me as I guess I don't know which way I'll end up facing, but I'm going to play this behind or while reading, and you can, just wander through and stare at the images that are playing, or, think through the text, wander through this space that we're in. My plan is to move in a somewhat like intuitive and cursory way across the text. It is a book that in some ways rewards a kind of linear movement through the text, but I think there are also other kind of readings that emerge from dipping in throughout. And I'm hoping that having the experience of the PowerPoint video, essentially, that I'm going to be playing here alongside some of the fragments from the book will give you a sense of, what is going on in Leech, at least in a, somewhat, disjointed or fragmentary way. Okay. Can you see did the screen pop up for anyone?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Might make it
met
bigger.
screen of the space. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so let me open up PowerPoint. This is the actual original PowerPoint of Leech. Yeah, certainly long document. Okay, so I'll play through this, start kind of moving through the text. I can't see any of the VR space right now, so just shout at me if I need to adjust anything. Okay, cool. I remember laparoscopic incisions, oozing tendrils and fungus, a blur of blue-green slimes and fuzz, quick turn, cut sequence, interior lights low, ambient TV buzzing towards the periphery, live drone vision closing in, close-up running, everyone is absorbed in pixelated blue, and repeating, clicking signals, the end of it all. The doctor is waiting for confirmation. The sign reads, pessimism is the future, flames and scattered burnouts, dogs snarl and corner the strays in dark corners, dreams. Memories and realities never seem to separate. Another world splinters off. And walking towards the neon shimmer, unease and echoes of migraines, angel weeping, the tallow liquid spilled. The exteriors are constructed in plexiglass in uniform or similar or repeated plexiglass exterior and exterior or exterior of similar repeated structures constructed in plexiglass. Interior structures of plexiglass in lines all even and uniform, repeated and structured uniformly. And all the plexiglass obscures the construction of the interior in the lack of transparency and structure and repeated form, or versions of plexiglass that make everything diffract and repeat in lines and lines and lines and layers and lines and repeated structures like crystals that diffract and repeat the vision through obscured transparency. Body is a network geological formation attached to metal hooks, rope, wooden frame, crashing waves, rocky shores. Body is locked within this material network, a nothing or another thing, a non-functional network, purely aesthetic, balanced, active, but concentrated. I used to always imagine these sorts of lifelines casting out from the body, stretching across every path the body moves through. These lines would always get tangled with other human lines, always producing knots and impossible textile. Leeches from the underworld don't want your blood. I stare into the bluish blur, weird erotic readings and cybernetic tentacles and deep tactile descriptions. I feel you crawling across the ridges of my brain. I recall these moments as subtle sensations in the absence of cinematic memories spliced into mental screens. Cannibalistic rituals where words eat words, a positive feedback loop that requires endless feeding, a battery to drain, a static charge running through an Ouroboros. A non-existent apocalypse, a slow death slog still life. Power resides in the process of obscuring and withholding information. Writing that will disappear into the chaos of the internet, that spiral. I only hope you can delay the inevitable or feel or whatever. Remember to read SCV, Habitat, and Dixie. Save these memories as after mass production of written works head towards decay and forgetting. An impossible future that will take the impossible to prevent. Don't let this all burn up at the end of everything. I want the echoes. An obliteration of the self leaves a soft ground, surface, a steady depth. Remain open to embrace the void, to hold and endure the absence, to wait for grace, all the red ones, and the blues, and the yellows. Arachno-vision networks artificially corrupt all. Retina scans, copious packing materials, spidery bits and pixels ingested, injected, interrupt, reported, in sequence, web irregularities, puncture, procure, provide, process, index. The ideas that splinter into invisible tendrils extend black threading, spreading through the digital interfaces, through ink and paper and across the screen fusion networks, all pass through my flesh and then continue back towards the other bodies and books that I was consuming, a netting of leechy lines and loose threads. a medium dissolving, bouquet, blur, synthetic bliss, the sliding glass door, a plastic tree under spotlights, a slightly damp patio, vapid realities, breathe deep. Hold for everything to take shape. A thought on the edge of the river, fall in, get out, silvery pools, echo chambers and fiber optic, slight glance into the morgue, another foundation, another headstone, another prayer, cut across the truth, feeling closer to textures than truth, rigid forms, open windows, material substrate in repose, extant text, another line, a space just beyond the end of my tongue, between the last word and the next, hot speech or sound, a sensory blur, an inoperable zone, a delay, a feeling present, high ambient blue light, hyperventilating, glitchy eyes, static breath. Ambivalence soaks my vision. I feel in quiet spaces the texture of reality and etching on the surface of an endless hellscape. An aesthetic web of cannibalized arachno leeches, the stabilimenta swerve, recalibrate the genetic passages to allow for parasitic processing, delays expected eventually. The texture of the page scuffs the texture of words. Decay is waiting. Each and every page, acid and time. I approach readability, then inject more noise, more static, more parasites, new pathways, new reading, new possibilities, all proliferate. I blur, hiding between the nodes of meaning, self-immolation on the page, fragments of truth. I can find myself completely absorbed in channeling the texts I've been reading, allowing their realities to spill out under my name. This can be terrifying. The words conflicting with the realities I wish to dwell in, building spaces I don't want to exist in, and yet I continue to write them, opening new doorways and passages. I write to overwrite, to rewrite, erasure through overload. I hope you can forgive me. I remember the cut, blur born once, medical grade scissors, hope or prayer, all the same and not, rhythmic distortion and calm, sleep postponed, a delay echoes. See the sky begin to shift, static, softens a light buzz. You leave it up to the reader, they can kill you. I remember when we connected our mouths and took in each other's exhaled breaths till we had used up all of the available oxygen. 17 minutes later, we both fell on the floor, unconscious, our lungs having filled with carbon dioxide. Other memories include sitting on a chair on a pitched roof until I fell, one where I was hanging on a branch until my grip gave out and I fell into a stream, and a memory in which I rode my bike into a canal. There's a particular thread that's embedded in this text, layered and overlapped with the endless surge of information, soaked in the brackish waters that seem to be everywhere now. Sampling, quiver, open, split, see, adjust, equinox, seal, loop hard, wear none, empty less, erotic, stable, groove, desire, vapid groove, rub, wait, construct, hold, soothe, none, cool, pressure, aquatic, cut, sacred curve, swell, zoom, fast, breeze, repeat, swerve, compressed eyes open slowly, video conchi, prying again, dwelling, under seedling. I remember sitting in a field watching the sun, total silence, feeling less. I remember sitting on the roof with you, staring at the cemetery, uneven lines of headstones, a slight tilt, spiraling around trees and other life. Feel the cool air expand the lungs, note your wandering attention. Return to the floor orb at the core of your being, feel the void within its center, expand and release, stare into TV Buddha, and repeat, repeat, and repeat. I remember exploring mental concentration and intuition, as means of non-visual and non-verbal perception, interaction, and communication through a series of exercises. Blindfolded and wearing earplugs, another man and I attempt to intuit and imitate each other's movements and bearings, so we can neither hear nor see. While blindfolded, I react in darkness, flinching and lunging as rubber balls are repeatedly thrown at me from off screen, that I try to keep my eyes open after dousing my face with soap suds, resulting in a tragicomic clown face. Then I repeatedly force my fist into my mouth till I gag. I walk towards the table, black threads trailing me, extending out beyond, bending around the corner I came from. I walk back, further stretching the line and twisting it across itself. Slowly, others walk across and through the threaded mess, trailing their own threaded mess. Further entanglement, and so on, and on, and on. Thanks.
All right. Clap. Oh, we were good.
It's a lot of reactions. Fantastic. Well, I don't know. Should we go into like one of these caves to have a conversation? It'd be a little bit more intimate.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Yeah, let's go in the flesh.
Here we
Sounds
go.
like a great
Going in
idea.
there? Okay.
Bye.
Oh, this one's really nice.
Yeah, it feels not at all ominous.
Great. So, I think we can like pretend for a moment that we're like, normal humans at a Q&A.
Yeah.
And that was so wonderful, Jake and Alex. And I don't know, it was really, there's so many, I've got so many thoughts, both about like seeing you in this space and seeing this work inhabit this space, but also, just so many questions about the work itself, which I find so inspiring. Can we start, Jake? Will you tell us a little bit about this PowerPoint you put together and how you excerpted from the work and sort of, of course, like I noticed the Bossion Otter. I noticed that there's a number of references, and I know your practice is very citational. So I don't know, would you be open to maybe just kind of unpacking a little bit of what we were just listening to?
Yeah. So the text like itself, I kind of moved like some of those early sections are really early in the book, but the majority of what I was reading was pretty late in the book, and that is heavily citational or documenting other a lot of like performance work from the 70s. And this is something. This book, in many ways, is indebted to those conversations that Danny was referring to earlier. Something Danny has talked about is the idea of like a fan poetics, because I think of a lot of aspects of kind of my writing process as really just being like a form of like fan fiction for art and poetry that I'm like really invested in. And so the actual like construction of this particular PowerPoint was largely just like against like resampling from the entire collection of images that I've been producing, and it's been a while since I've used PowerPoint to create like a more this is like my version of like a more normal use of PowerPoint, I think, compared to the methods that I have been trying to use it for. So I really just wanted it to both be giving a sense of the like general like aesthetics and visuals that accompany the entirety of the text, some of which are a bit more ambient. Others are like reprocessing, as you were saying before, other types of performance and video work, screenshots that have been kind of folded in as well. Just trying to combine all of these various pieces.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think like, am I, oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I think, you know, I always find it funny when a writer starts by talking about the platform that they're working in, like the you know, like it's not, you wouldn't hear like Stephen King talk about like the Word document that often. But you know, like,
Yeah.
I am interested in like thinking about, you know, PowerPoint as an aesthetic medium. It's something you hear much more in art rather than writing practices, and this is part of why I was very interested in Alex's perspective as well, coming from an art historical background. We have you know, some students here in the Text Tech Media Lab, for example, in the Design Media Arts program, where it's quite common to say, you know, I'm working with oil paint, or I'm working with mixed materials, or so on. It's not so common in writing. So I'm interested in that, I mean, in your practice, and thinking about what I would say, like, I don't know, like PowerPoint specificity or something. But also, I know that that's something that you've been thinking about quite a bit, Alex, in terms of various digital platforms and what kind of materialism they have, or what kind of material these platforms, both in terms of how they shape an artwork, but also in terms of, like, you know, how you think of those as material. I guess in both of your works, I'd be interested to hear some of your thoughts.
Well, I mean, obviously the word materiality is kind of a paradox when we're talking about the nominally immaterial, though, of course, you know, the power, the server farms, the labor, these are all very material things. But I mean, in terms of the tangibility of the object, right? PowerPoint is an interesting constraint just because of what it does to moving around images. I know I've used PowerPoint in moments of desperation when I didn't have money for like a Photoshop subscription, but I had to make like a poster for an event, that kind of thing. So I know how it feels to use it to move images. And I think when we talk about early presses where you could easily slot in wood blocks with lead type, for instance, like that started people using kind of genre images or the reproduction of generic blocks with new text as a literary practice. And like PowerPoint has specific media specific modes that would encourage certain literary practices that I'm sure Jake can speak to more specifically. And I think, well, the Word doc, for instance, you know, you write about 500 words in a page in like size 12 Times New Roman or Garamond, maybe a little more in TNR or Garamond, maybe that's Helvetica. And that does encourage you to kind of think in those chunks, right? And I mean, Jake, what do you find about PowerPoint as medium in terms of how it changes how you write?
Yeah, I think like my initial use of PowerPoint, one came from, I think, those types of constraints you were initially referring to. I had like a computer that already had Microsoft Office loaded up on it, and I was not thinking about, you know, trying to purchase other programs at the time. And I initially started using it because Word wouldn't allow me to as easily, you know, move text around on the page and cut up text and embed images really easily.
Yeah, it's horrible for that.
You know, I used to do that, and then like I would make one change in the document and everything shifts. You know, that was really like when I had no sense of what I was doing, and then I just found PowerPoint to be a much easier way of just starting to work with like text image kind of stuff. And then I got like really obsessed with the like cropping tools and things like that that were available in the like earlier versions of PowerPoint. You know, because if you were like really focused and dedicated, you could do a lot of you know, pretty good and like I mean, at the time, like what I thought was like interesting and fun kind of work within those like really particular constraints. And also like, you know, it was, I was the only person that I knew that was trying to do that at the time. Like I wasn't working with many other artists or writers that thought that PowerPoint was the way to go. And
one of the ways I learned about thinking about architecture and architecture as technology and architecture as it related to how we use technology to conceive of space is that I had The Sims because they made it for my Mac, and the furniture and the architecture just was not to my taste. So of course I would try to use this kind of very primitive tool as if it were like AutoCAD or something. I would try to force the game to be something it wasn't, and restraint forced creativity out of me that I didn't, that I ended up finding. And I was just doing it for myself because at the time you couldn't export anything. You still can't really very easily. And so it's a very generative process to be constrained in many ways. It's a formal, like almost a formalism, right? In the way that poetic form is a constraint that is generative. I also think we often talk in the history of the book how the codex is not simply the text, and the book is not either just the text or just the codex. The history of the book is filled with multimedia, with images, with spaces, and I think Jake's work is in many ways a return to that. And I hope that we'll see more paradigital forms, books that incorporate experiences like using PowerPoint, things like that, because of course, the act of using oak gall ink on a piece of vellum does influence how people write text in the Middle Ages. And the act of like thinking about how much it costs to carve a single woodblock influences printing before movable type. And so technology has always impacted what we think of as the book and how we write books. And I'm excited to see sort of what happens, although some of the more recent examples, I mean, there's really, really good algorithmically assisted prose. I think Inside the Castle has a thing called Castle Freak, where a couple people I know who are really talented have done it. And then there's people just using ChatGPT, and it just doesn't, work. Like all literature, some experimental forms will be successful and some will suck, because that's what taking a risk is. And I guess I have to ask Jake and maybe Danny as well, sort of what new forms you might, because we're in an XR space, might see literature taking in reaction to XR VR, and also because people so often read on their phones or off of screens.
Hey, Danny, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh God, I have like way too many thoughts on all of that. I was just talking with Brian earlier about really amazing XR work called Dear Angelica, and which is kind of formally quite it's not so exciting in terms of like how it approaches narrative or storytelling, but the idea of being surrounded by words, being able to move in and out of things. I mean, a lot of my I feel like a lot of the energy that drew me to experimental poetry and writing in the first place has moved into experimental games and game spaces. And, I'm very inspired by the kind of work happening here at the Game Lab and in precisely that mode where the genres haven't solidified yet. And so people are still making weird things I don't understand. And I find that really exciting. But I don't want to actually what I'd like to do, because we have such a like lovely set of and Jake, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. But I also want to open it up to all the people. We have a group of people who are here in person, and I'm curious what the hot dog and the rat and the astronaut, the fox, the robot, the iPod, and the television in front of me might have to say. I really appreciate everyone being here. Your characters are all just kind of like dumbly staring at me, which is like a certain kind of nightmare.
It also looks like that fox is swimming.
Yeah, the fox.
Is that you, Brian?
Luminous with rat blinks, and that really gives me the sense that someone is actually watching, and even if the blink, in fact, is motivated.
I'm here. I actually have a new avatar, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
I had to log in, and then I noticed the avatar option, so now I'm like some freak.
You probably want to press G and then get yourself out of the floor.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm still working on navigation here.
So does anyone have a question?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, the fact that we're having these conversations about very physical things in an intangible space and talking in this flesh cave that is, of course, not flesh is itself indicative of something. Oh, I see that you're glancing at me. Does that mean?
I don't know if I'm still on the floor, but
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
one thing that I've thought about with these kinds of spaces and text is that because I've been doing this for a long time, not in 3D though, is that it quite often is quite hard to read text in 3D. But I think, that's why video games offers, I still can't get out of the floor. such a great way to still use text because you have audio and so forth. So I just feel like that's an aesthetic issue that I think all of us that deal with digital technology right, and text have to kind of think about, which is like, and I think the PowerPoint solution is actually pretty cool. Jesus, I can't get out of the. Anyway, so I wonder what your thoughts are about that. You know, like how hard is it to read text in a 3D space, or to even have 3D text? You know, like text that floats around, or because I did work with the the cave environment back at Brown University, which was. I don't know how many of you know about this, but it was basically a box, and you know you could project text on all the walls, and you wore 3D glasses and so forth, and people would create these, you know, experiments with floating text. But I always found that it was a little bit hard to read.
Oh, I can't read like that. I mean, I would love to. I mean, I spend a lot of time, I'm very online, right? And this is like my online time. I'm in London, but I was talking to Jake about how I would love to do like, I don't know, you know, teach Heidegger on technology in a space like this, but you actually pull up a PDF and concentrate on the text, and you become so distracted by your physical body and the avatar. It looks like Danny's drowning.
He's as lost as I am.
Yeah, but it just becomes this challenge of like focus. And I personally, in a space like this, could never seriously attend to text as the primary medium, or text not written for a space like this. I agree that the game world provides some really provocative and interesting solutions, though. I haven't played Half-Life Alyx on goggles. That's the one game that people tell me is truly immersive in the VR space that they've played. It's not really my style of game, but if it was the one that people really thought, you know, did it for them, I would love to see that. But so far, I have found, at least in terms of, and I mean, maybe my future colleague at IDM, Carla Ganis, could speak to this since she explicitly works on narrative. But I've just, in some ways, I found the VR space to be distracting to like narrative, but because Jake's text is not a linear experience in some ways, it worked nicely as a complement.
I think it really does require, like, I mean, I think it's about like spending certain amounts of time. The first time I spent any substantial amount of time in virtual space was during the pandemic, where, you know, not only do I like do all of my exercise and play like a number of like exercise games, like, you know, Beat Saber and Supernatural and Till You Fall and In Death Unchained. There's some really interesting roguelites in VR, but you know, it was also a way to connect with friends. Like my partner and I would watch movies with a friend of ours who lived in New York, who we hadn't seen for 2 years. And so we would get very immersed in like, you know, watching Paranormal Activity in 3D in a virtual theater. And I ended up teaching a lot of my classes in Hubs, where students like the first session I think is always a little bit like this, where it's just like disorienting and you're stuck in the water and you don't know how to get out. And then like slowly, like the more time you spend in it, I think like, you know, there's narratives and like, you know, different forms of engagement can emerge. At the same time, like I think that, you know, it's important to be skeptical. Michael Lowe, who's here, I know has been thinking about these, you know, for example, oh yes, the brain dance record drone trafficking around. I know Michael has been thinking a lot about, you know, the newest Apple headset sort of like ad campaign and the like, you know, the horrifying dystopia of like wearing the screen sort of all of the time. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting time to try. It's an interesting time to try to like figure out how those things work out and how they match in together. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
I heard that it is perhaps possible for a user to die, but the recording of the eyes is, of course, being played where your eyes are. So you would have eyes even though they might be frozen open and a death rectus or deceased or whatever, and the lenticular video of the eyes would still be playing.
Oh my god.
It's
very different than like a dead MySpace.
When you call someone using the goggles, it's not video, right? So it's this hyper real but also uncanny self that's talking, and the idea that this is a type of closeness I think people will ultimately find repellent. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll get over it, but I wanted the Apple goggles to ship with something killer that would convince me the price point was worth it. Like that's a lot of laptop.
Yeah.
But
well, I think the Apple, I mean, from what little I know about it, is that they want it to be a very practical device, you know. Which
like a developer.
kind of, I'm sorry?
Like a developer tool, I get it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they want. I mean, the one thing I liked about, I was just thinking about this today, is that they showed people wearing the glasses or the Google or whatever the lenses on an airplane. You know, which I don't think Steam or anybody else, was just like
Wait,
imagine
you're
people.
gonna do that with a 2-hour battery life? What kind of flight is that exactly? Good luck.
Well, maybe you could plug it in or something. Who knows? But
That never works for my freaking laptop. I was so mad I was on a transatlantic flight. Oh, I'm having goggles shoved at me. Great.
Okay. So yeah.
But dude,
Can I?
I just.
Oh, go ahead.
Whoa. Sorry, just got distracted.
Somebody's giving you some goggles, I think. Yeah, other questions? Mashinka, do you have something? I think you'll speak. Mashinka is going to be speaking from my head because we're using the same mic in the Text Tech Lab. So
That's not a kidding.
my head contains multiple voices.
Thank you both so much. This has
you're
been
Walt Whitman.
such a pleasure to inhabit this space with you. I was thinking of a question pretty early on in the Q&A, but I think maybe we've sort of spoken around that now, so feel free to discard this. But you were both talking about the kind of constraint-based affordances of the PowerPoint as a medium, and PowerPoint is, of course, like fundamentally a pedagogical or instructional medium. And then I was thinking about how, both Danny and I have conducted courses in VR spaces that have radically altered the way that we approach pedagogy given the spatial constraints. And so, a general question, I suppose, thinking across PowerPoint and this VR space, like what do we have to learn from these spaces, and what are the capacities for learning in these spaces? And again, I think we've already touched on some of this with respect to altered economies of attention, but I'm throwing that out there in case it's of interest to parse.
Yeah, that's thank you. I think that's a really good way of kind of framing it up, because there are, just as you were saying, right, certain like new affordances, new possibilities that open up in these spaces. But I also, have been really interested in the type of, those spaces of friction, or the type of like glitchiness, right, when we're like pushing back against the kind of smoothness or the flow that these types of digital spaces encourage. And same thing with PowerPoint, which is, one of the reasons I like it. There is like a very easy way to use PowerPoint that requires both very little engagement with the actual material without any sort of serious depth or consideration of the complexity of things. Like I think like one of the best examples were like all the leaked, NSA PowerPoint slides that are both saying nothing, and also these documents of this like incredible scale of surveillance. And so, seeing the type of ways in which these technologies, proliferate and encourage a certain type of use, but also allow for us to come up with new ways of engaging with them, and new ways of pushing back against their like everyday use in the mundane kind of everyday. Those kind of concerns people were raising about the Apple goggles and things like that.
I guess what I liked about your book, Jake, was that it wasn't an either or. I could engage with the weird glitchiness of VR XR. I could be online at 3 a.m, and at the same time, I was engaging with the seriousness with questions about literature and aesthetics and theory. And I think to succeed, to do what you've done, requires a certain level of skill, a certain quality of poetry or prose, right? And I think it's rare, which is one of the reasons I really like LEECH. But what I hope going forward is not that we'll abandon one thing for the other, or that we'll see them as oppositional, but that we'll find a way to sustain a kind of hybrid culture. I don't know what it'll look like yet. I guess LEECH made me optimistic that it could happen in some way.
Well, if I could maybe add something, back in the 2000s, I used to edit a series of PDFs for a website called ubu.com, which you might be familiar with or maybe not. And I was working with an author named Carolyn Bergvall. And we were going to, usually with most of those PDFs, I would just quite often reset the PDF, reset the book or something like that, and just, then put it on ubu.com. But Carolyn wanted to really use the PDF form, like really kind of exploit that that particular file type. And I felt like I kind of let her down a little bit because I think she thought that PDFs could do more than they could actually do. But nonetheless, we did do a recreation of her book, which was a beautiful book to begin with, but we did a kind of brand new version of it online. So I actually think that, and I think PowerPoint, I think in the way that we're talking about it is essentially, I don't know that much about PowerPoint, to be honest with you. If I make a slideshow, I just basically turn it into a PDF. But I love utilizing these kind of utilitarian kind of file formats for artistic ends, and great things happen if you spend time with them.
R.I.P. David Foster Wallace, who might have given us the first great Excel novel. That's what I think about every time I read The Pale King.
Oh, really?
Well, because it's about bureaucracy and the IRS and tabulation and forms, right? And what would that look like if it was written as forms or as? I hate Excel, right? And I also noticed this year when I filed my taxes, and I was filing from abroad and had fairly complex problems because I pay taxes on my income in Germany. And TurboTax had this thing called race mode where you were supposed to try to finish your taxes as fast as possible. And I was like, this is disaster to happen. I also kind of wanted to try TurboTax as a game. And I had to hold myself back from nuking my own taxes. And then I was like, what if this was a novel or an experience that was a literary experience, like doing your taxes? And I just was like, wow, is there a TurboTax work of literature? I think the practical software that's not designed to be literature is paradoxically often more interesting than the stuff that is, or that aspires to be, because there's a lot of pretentious crap that often comes out of the world.
Well, I think given the fact that we've ended up with TurboTax and we've gone over an hour, I feel like we should
Did no one else get race mode? Am I the only person who saw this?
Oh no! Well, I don't know. There was a dating sim also where the character would do your taxes for you. It was short-lived, mostly, but it was like a functional.
But for real?
Yeah, it was a functional dating sim where you dated a tax accountant who actually did your taxes while you played the dating sim. It was quite amazing. But
that's cool.
Yo, I wanna maybe if we can just everyone can stay in the space and maybe we can play a bit too. One of the things that's great about being in the space like this is that you can. And some of you have already started doing some of this, but you can drop any kind of 3D asset directly into the space. I don't know. Here's a giant crab. But it would be, I think that we're welcome to continue playing. But I think maybe if we end the sort of formal presentation portion of the section just with a round of applause reacts for our speakers, and then we can have more informal conversation and play. Okay, here we go. Yeah, as soon as you open this Pandora's box, things get wild pretty quickly.
No, there's birds.
Most of all, I want to thank Alex and Jake so much for joining us. I want to thank everyone for coming out, both the folks in real life here in the Media Lab and all of you out in the pink void. Thank you so much, and please join me in a round of, I guess, I won't say applause, but clap reacts for Alex and Jake. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, you guys. And
thank you so much.